Okay, so I'm installing the Ruby nozzle onto my Prusa i3 Mark III. I just thought I'd talk you through the way I change nozzles. It's not necessarily the best way, it's certainly not the only way, but it's the way I do it. First thing I do is I preheat, I preheat everything, but certainly preheat the nozzle to the temperature of the last filament that you had in. I mean, at the moment I've actually still got my filament in, so we will, once we've got it up to temperature, we unload the filament, which now on my Prusa goes fast, then slow, and then fast again. So we take that out of the way. Now the other thing I've done is I've lifted the Z axis up to its highest setting, which of course is 210 on here. Now in the case of this one, we're going to need to remove the fan housing. It's not a housing, is it? It's the shroud, I suppose you would call it, that directs the air around. So we'll remove that so we can actually get to the hot end and to the nozzle, and then I'll show you how we go about that. Now from this point on, you must remember that you're dealing with incredibly high temperatures. This is now, that nozzle is at 215 degrees. You don't want to be touching it. In fact, you want to be keeping as far away from it as possible. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to turn the power off at this point. So we no longer have an issue with electricity. And if you're fairly quick with the replacement, you're not going to have too many issues with the heat dropping too quickly, but it just keeps you safe. So I'll just turn the power off. Right, so the power is now off. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you the most important thing. When removing that nozzle, you want a ratchet with a 7mm, in this case, socket. Reason for that is when you undo this, that hot nozzle is going to drop inside there. You're not going to have to touch it with your fingers. You're not going to have to do anything that may cause damage to you. You're not trying to pick it up if it falls on the floor. So please, 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 you know, use a socket. It's the only safe way to do it. Now the next thing you need to remember is that hot end there. The block, the heater block, you don't want that to turn in any way, shape or form, because if that turns, there's a chance of you breaking one of the cables that goes into it, whether it's the thermistor or the sensors or anything like that. So what I do is I get an adjustable spanner. Now I know this is a bit of overkill, but it's the only one I had to hand. And I get an adjustable spanner and I get that so it nips the heater block. So there is now no way that that heater block can spin when I put the ratchet up. Get that on, so hold the heater block and then slowly, there we go, and off she goes. So that is now loose, so I can take that out and move on to the stage of fitting the new one. So ever so carefully just spin that out. Now I can feel the socket getting warm, so goodness knows how hot that actual piece of brass is. Now the next thing to remember is not to put it down anywhere where it's going to burn or melt. I've got a Raspberry Pi Zero tin off to the side of me here, which of course is metal, so I've just got the lid from that, and all I'm going to do is, there's the lid you see, all I'm going to do is just drop it in like so, and that's that red hot nozzle. For goodness sake, do not touch it. You will take the skin off your fingers. Take it from someone who's been there. You know, I make these mistakes so you don't have to. So that's the nozzle off into there. Now in my case I'm fitting my Ruby nozzle in. So I'll get my Ruby nozzle out of my box. You've all seen this on other videos. Just bring her up into shot. There she is. There's my beautiful Ruby nozzle. So exact opposite. If you want to, in the meantime, put some heat into your block, turn your power back on and put some heat into your block, just so you can tighten it up a bit better. By all means do so, but remember, red hot, you know, it will take the skin off your fingers. And then make sure that you've actually got your ratchet the right way. Now wind it up. Till it starts to bite, and then I would seriously suggest heating your block up at this point again. Get that temperature back up to around 215 degrees, give or take, and then once you've got it back up to that temperature, just get your spanner back on, which is easier said than done. Trying to do 18 things at once here and it's not working out particularly well. Get the spanner back on, and while that block is hot, give that nozzle a tighten. Don't over tighten it for goodness sake, but give it a tighten like that. So that's now in. Now at this point, to check that you've got things right, and if you have got your block back up to temperature, which I now have done, it's back up to 220 degrees actually. I've got it at the moment. So what we'll do now is we'll actually feed the filament back in. Now, being as this is the Prusa, this is on auto feed. So if we've done this properly, which I'm hoping we have, it's a pity the camera won't focus on the bit I wanted to focus on. But we should hopefully see when this filament is loaded, we should see it coming out of the bottom of the there with no leakage around the side, because that is then telling us that we've got that tightened up properly. And as you can see, there's no leakage from around the sides of the nozzle at all, so that is telling me that that is fitted snugly enough. Doesn't need to be any more than that. Don't ever over tighten them. You've got a good chance of shearing them in the heater block, and that's not a good idea. So it's as simple as that. That is now new nozzle swapped over, so it's just a matter of putting the fan shroud back on and then recalibrating your printer. If you've got a printer with bed levelling on, such as this Prusa i3 Mark III, or any other printer that has self-levelling, or even if it's a manual levelling, you must re-level at this point, because that nozzle is not going to be in the same position that the other nozzle was. In fact, I can tell you for certain that I need to actually change where my pinder probe is, because I don't know whether you can see from that angle, but my pinder probe is now actually lower than the nozzle. So this nozzle is shorter in physical height than the original one was. So if I start to try and print with this, that pinder probe there is going to hit the bed before my nozzle is anywhere near it. So I'm going to have to recalibrate that first, as it told you in your description when you first build your printer, or if you've got it pre-built. If you look in the online builder's manual, it'll tell you exactly how to set that up. And basically what you do is you get the nozzle onto the bed. I put a piece of paper in between the nozzle and the bed, get the nozzle down to the bed, and then you put a cable tie underneath the pinder probe, so the cable tie is touching the bed and then the other side of it is on the pinder probe, so that gives you your gap distance. So I've got to now redo that after I've refitted the fan shroud, and then we're ready to print. The nut slackened off for any bed levelling probe you may have. Mine is a nut sat in there. I'm now going to lower this carriage back down to the bed, First thing I'm going to do again is turn the preheating off. I should be able to just cool it down. So the easiest way probably to do that actually is just go to the main screen. I know you can't see what I'm doing here, and I can go if you go to the preheat settings, there is actually a setting for cool down at the bottom. So that will now cool my hot end down and my bed down, so I've got less chance of setting light to myself. And then I'm going to go to settings, to move axis, and I'm going to move the Z axis down. Well, actually the easiest thing to do is first, we're just, like I said, I've got that loose now, so I just want to move that probe up ever so slightly before we go any further. So I know that it is slightly higher than the nozzle before we do anything else. That is a tight fit, is that? I mean, it's supposed to be, we don't want it slipping about, but it is a tight fit. I'm sure some of you have struggled with this already yourselves. Please remember that hot end is still hot. Don't go grabbing hold of the hot end trying to shift it, because that won't do you any good at all. In fact, that'll do you some real harm. Now the other thing is, if you have trouble with this pinner probe, if it does become a real problem, pair of tweezers or something like that. I know you can't see because it's all slipped out of place. Typical fantastic camera work I have. Right, what I was going to suggest is, if you actually put your tweezers into that piece of the mount, you can actually open that part of the mount up ever so slightly, like that, which means the probe then moves up a lot easier. It saves fighting with it. So I've now got that in a better place. It's not perfect. Oh, there's zooming camera going again. Oh, did I say Watson Hall? I certainly meant it, didn't I? Right, so that's got that set now in a much better position. So what I can do now is just resetting the printer because the Z-axis thinks it's at 0 and it doesn't like going below 0. You'll find it only goes up and it won't come down. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down and home it. Now please make sure that your pin probe isn't too far up, because otherwise everything will crash into your bed. Have your hand on the off switch just in case things go badly wrong. Hopefully they won't. They are, you see. As long as that probe is somewhere close to where you want to be, that will just work. So what we do now is we now get the piece of paper and we're going to lower the bed in very small increments. I use the live Z adjustment because it moves it in such small increments. So we'll get a sheet of paper. I'm using my old car phone warehouse contract. Don't know why, just because it's available. So what we'll do is, see the Z at the moment is 0.15. If we go down to settings, we can go down to Live Z Adjust. Don't notice the actual figure that's there at the moment. You can hear that's just gone down ever so slightly, and you just keep testing with your paper until you get just a bit of drag back, so it's nipping the nozzle. This is how anybody who has a manual bed leveling, or does manual bed leveling, will know exactly what I'm doing here. It's just an easy way of getting that distance between the nozzle and the bed close to being right. I'm just starting to feel a tiniest bit of a drag now, but like I say, using the Live Z really does make a difference as to how small the increments are. Now that to me is biting quite well. That's about where I feel personally we need to be. So what we'll do now is we'll now set the probe, and we do that by using a cable tie. The main body of the cable tie, you don't use the thin end. You get to the main part of the body, and of course I haven't got one to hand. Yes, I have. Thank you, Joseph. He always brings a bag of them. Always get a bag with the kit. So you want to use the middle part, not the end. Make sure it's the middle part that goes under the probe. I mean, if you want to push it in from the end, now amazingly enough, don't quite know how I've managed that. I'll just do a bit of a horrible zoom in, but somehow I've got that probe set almost perfectly right. There is some resistance to, oh, you can't see a bloody camera. There is some resistance to that, but not a massive amount. I might just get away with that. But then on the other hand, that does then put the probe very close to the bed. So the issue with that is that if you've got any warping at all while you're printing, there is a chance that that probe could crash into what you're printing and write your print off. Sorry about all this jiggling about. Just trying to get you set back up on the stand. So what I'm going to do is, in this case, because I've previously with the last nozzle I had on, it was close. On some occasions I did think to myself that it was actually, this probe was actually going to crash into what I was printing, and it did worry me a little. So what I'm going to do is, using the system I said, slide something in to the actual bracket itself and just twist it slightly. That opens the bracket up, which means it's much easier to lift the probe out. I mean, try not to do it by the cable, but it's not always that easy. Now I can tell that that is now slightly higher up, so all I'm doing is I'm just coaxing that pinner probe so it's slightly higher up than it was. I mean, it's so, because I've opened that up, that is so loose in there now that if I actually put the cable tie under there and twist the cable tie on its side, it is actually moving the probe up ever so slightly in the mounting. So then that improves things. If you find that doesn't work, get a spatula or a knife. I mean, I'll just show you with my trusty spatula, which I use for cleaning the bed off. You can just lift it ever so slightly like that. You see that went up. Like I said, it's a lot better than pulling on the cable. Now that's possibly given me a little bit too much room, so a little wiggle like that. There we are. That's perfect. That's just about where we want to be. So we can slide that back out of there, tighten the probe up like so. Put the fan shroud back on. Now to get this on correctly, you just need to loosen the fan off slightly as per the instructions, then click that into place like that. Put that screw back in first, because we know that's then in the right place. Don't know whether you can see any of it. Oh, you can. Put that screw back in first, and then just make sure that that's sat in to that nozzle, and then we will just tighten those down so we know that the fan is blowing the air into the nozzle. We'll tighten that one. We'll tighten that one, so that's the fan now tight back together, and then we'll just go back and we'll recalibrate now and see what happens. So calibration wise, we don't need to go through the whole wizard. Don't think that's necessary. We just calibrate the XYZ. So first of all, it'll auto home, so it'll do calibrate the Z axis. So that will take the Z axis all the way to the top. I'll just take you off the tripod because I'll hold it. So usual thing is the steel sheet on the bed. It is. So it asks me to remove it. Remember, if you've had it up to temperature, be careful with that. That's still going to be hot. Check your nozzles clean. Always important to check your nozzles clean. Always put your sheet of paper under. Again, this stops you damaging your sheet. It's very good the way that this is set up, so it's very careful about. But it talks you through everything. It makes everything easy to understand. I wouldn't say idiot proof, because I've made some mistakes already, but it just takes the worst of the panic out of it. Now, the first 4 points, as you well know if you've read the instructions, you've got to make sure that that is underneath like that, so it doesn't damage the surface or damage the nozzle should it crash into it. I'd hate to damage my Ruby nozzle. So we'll let this go through its first stage of calibration, and then we'll come back and we'll have a look and see how we got on. So on we go with first layer calibration. It just does its jumping along, just checking its bed level. I mean, you all know how this works. You've all done this, I'm sure. Many of us several times when we've got cable ties in the wrong place and it doesn't quite work properly. We all know the little issues. I'm not going to bother dialing this in too much at this stage. This is just to show you that nozzle is now happily away. You can see there, look, happily getting a white line out of there. And you can't really see because I can't get some light on it, but we're away with the first level calibration. I shall have to do this without having the camera in my hand, of course, but as you can see, that's away and working, doing what it needs to do. So there you go. That's how I change a nozzle. Now, the only things I will say for definite, watch the heat. You do not want to burn your fingers, but do make sure that that heater block is hot when you remove the original nozzle. Otherwise you will have issues with nozzles shearing, and trust me, you do not want to go down that road. So yeah, make sure that heater block is hot before you attempt to remove that nozzle. Make sure that you clamp the heater block with something like an adjustable spanner that I used there, just to make sure that it doesn't move and you don't damage any of the wires going into it. Be careful. Hot and little fingers doesn't work very well. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for the new subscribers. In fact, I did have a new subscriber pop up while I was editing this video. So George Smith, who was literally just subscribed while I've been doing this, thank you very much. Thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, I would be incredibly pleased. But just keep watching the videos, keep liking, keep subscribing, comment in the description. Oh, and just a little something, I'm sure you've all been wondering. That little box there, some of you will recognise it. It's just me being me and my usual techie clever self. But basically what that does is this. Hey Google, turn Prusa off.
Sure, turning off the Prusa.
Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.